do you just want to be held? Oh my gosh, okay, we can do that. Let's go on a trip to the past. Last fall, I took a trip to the myriad of public spaces we have that are just inundated with sumac trees. If you live where I live, there are sumac trees like basically everywhere that there is a sunny open spot, so they proliferate in parks and in ditches or on roads. You are hard-pressed not to find some sumac trees if you look for them. Okay, so we are right outside a highway and an airport, so it is like crazy loud ambient noise here. But last night I got a wild hair idea. What if I collected some sumac berries and used them to dye the wool? So I'm a little late in the season. You can kind of see it's a little bit past the moment, but we're still gonna try it. We'll see what happens. I'm gonna collect the brightest berries I can find. They are a little, like I said, a little past their moment, but I'm gonna do my best. And so we're gonna go foraging. Let's go foraging. Also, is it just me, or are these things like kind of actually beautiful? You know, after snipping a whole bunch of them in a row, you kind of begin to appreciate like the innate beauty of the actual sumac berry bunch. I think they're really pretty. I've been wondering, like, when is enough sumac? Like, when do I stop collecting? And the answer is when it starts to rain. So it's time to go. It is now the spring. It took me a little while to get through the process of spinning, and before that carding, and before that washing the fleece. Through the process of spinning, I kind of accidentally ended up with two different types of yarn, a slightly thicker and a slightly thinner version. So I decided to make it a feature rather than a bug, and I decided to dye just one type of that yarn. So the thicker yarn is what I am dyeing. After all, something had to be my chosen yarn. So it gets to go in the dye pot. Most often when dyeing with natural dyes like sumac berries, you'll have the best luck when you use something called a mordant. In this particular case, I'm using a mordant called alum. I'm still using what is considered best practices, so I'm keeping a separate dye pot for dyeing, a separate set of utensils for measuring, but all in all, alum is not super iffy like a lot of other mordants out there are. When using alum powder, 10 to 20% of weight of fiber is generally what is recommended, so I go ahead and I measure out the weight of the yarn, and then use that to calculate how much alum powder I will need in my dye pot. And throughout this whole process, I'm trying to do as much as I can to reduce shocking the yarn. So I'm doing things like making sure that when I introduce the yarn to the dye pot, it is already wet, and that when I cool things off, I'm letting the pot of water and the yarn cool down together. That's just to prevent as much shock as possible. We want to be gentle to this thing we're not being very gentle to. While that is cooling, I go ahead and I start processing out the berries. The berries are still on their stems from when I collected them in the fall, so I go ahead and sort of roll my hands through them and separate them from the stems as much as possible. I want to have as potent a dye pot as possible, and I know what color the sumac berries will imbue. I don't know what color the stems will imbue, and I don't want to muddy it up at all. So while I'm not going to be like 100% a purist about it, I do try to remove as much of the stem material as possible. Also, pro tip, I should have been wearing gloves. The sumac berries aren't toxic or anything, but the sticks were actually pretty pointy and like irritating to my skin. I've got a little bit of eczema on my hands, and that was not that was not very nice to my skin. So, pro tip, be nicer to your skin than I was to mine. Unlike with the alum mordant, I'm not trying to hit a specific weight with this. I don't actually know what the right amount of berries is to weight of fiber, so I just go until I feel like I have a crap ton, and then I call it a day. I put all my berries in the water, and I start raising the temperature and starting to create the dye bath itself. That is, aka using the hot water to leach as much color out of the berries as possible. It's at this point that I make a critical mistake. I realize that the pot is too small for the amount of berries and water I have, plus when I want to add the yarn, it's just going to be way too much. There's no way that it's going to fit in this smaller pot. So I start to pour it off into the larger pot that I have, and I completely throw my back out. Don't do this. I was like pretzeling to try and stay behind the camera, so like the back of my head wasn't in the shot, and like I was twisted and lifting, and like that's exactly what you shouldn't do. Everyone tells you not to do that, and they are totally right. It's not the first time I've thrown my back out, but it's the most like obviously my own fault that I've thrown my back out. So that was a little bit mortifying, and kind of took me out of the game for about 2 weeks. So don't do that. It is not fun. I simmer the sumac berries just under a boil. I don't actually want to like cook the berries, I just want to leach as much of the color out of them into the water as possible. I let that go for 2 to 3 hours, and then I sieve off as I sieve off as much of the berry material as I can, which is not all of it. There's so much berry in this water, but I sieve off as much as I can and then add in my wool. It's time for the wool to have its exciting bath. The wool hangs out in the dye bath for about an hour, also at a higher temperature. Again, not boiling, just under a simmer. And absorbs as much as possible. The alum helps prepare the fiber to absorb that color, so the mordant was an important step, and it also kind of, depending on what you're using to dye, affects the final color you get. Speaking of final color, let's talk about it. So the final result for the yarn is kind of this honey golden toffee tan color. It is more or less what I expected to get, but I am somehow still a little bit disappointed. I knew going in that the only way to sort of get that like reddish pinkish color was dyeing cottons, not wool. But I still sort of held out hope that somehow a little bit of like a pinkish undertone would come through, and it didn't really. It's still a really nice tan. I'm not mad about it, but I am just sort of like, oh. But it was a dye stuff that is plentiful in my area, and it's really nice to know what you can produce with it. 4 small skeins in this kind of toffee tan, and then 8 small skeins in the original sort of oatmeal whitish color, which, in case you missed it, weaving is the next step, and it's the step I've been looking forward to the most. I'm so excited that we're finally here. We're going to weave. I'm super stoked. Next, we're going to be designing and winding our warp. For the moment, be queer and make stuff. It's really important. And yeah, thanks for sticking with me. All right. All right. Bye.